So Alan, thanks for coming over to visit us at 11FS today.
Of course.
And it's great to have you here. I wanted to have a conversation with you, and some of the conversations we've had kind of chatting remotely, just about how organisations are set up, and if we think they're set up well to kind of use and capitalise on some of the jobs to be done research they might be doing, or how their product teams might be set up to deliver value to customers. What are you seeing from the kind of people that you work with?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, and I tweeted about this, and you respond to it, and actually I kind of threw out a firebomb, which is kind of how you stimulate conversation, right? Which is, well, if everyone says we should be customer centric and we should focus on the customer, yet oftentimes they organize their company around products, right? So we actually have a product team and our product managers, and so that's how they're kind of, they say they're customer centric, but they're actually centered around a product or a series of products. And so I think that's one constraint, I would say, also not just in kind of jobs thinking, but also for organizations thinking about how they can create growth, because there's already a inherent bias of how we're structured. And so I find that one thing that blocks organizations thinking, really being creative about what they can build or how they might change existing product, is that constraint. They're focused around product teams as opposed to, say, being focused around demand, right? So like we say, what business are we in? If you ask that to people within your organization, you might say, oh, we're in the banking business, or we're in the food delivery service, or whatever. They default to the product, but they don't say things like, well, we're in the business of helping people save up and plan for their vacations, or we're in the business of helping you make sure that you can retire at 50 or whatever it is. So I think that thinking is a constraint, both to also kind of adopting jobs theory, but also to thinking about how we can create growth and how we expand upon just one particular product.
Do we think that's a language constraint, or do we think that's something that's a practical reality for organizations? Because product manager, for example, as a description of a role within an organization, is interpreted and is implemented, or that role is implemented in so many different ways. Product management is such a broad church of activities, and on the one hand, you've got people that are just kind of focusing on the expert of being on that market. You've got people that pull together design and business and the customer really well. And actually, the really good product managers, in my experience, are those that bring the kind of supply side and the demand side, the customer side and the competitor side together to create new value for customers. So I think there's really great work going on there, but is the language we're using the issue here?
Yeah, I think, well, actually, you're describing the many different interpretations of product manager. And I think actually that in itself is a signal that maybe the title of product manager is not good. If people are having to adapt or change what it means to be a product manager, then maybe that's like signaling that the idea of a product manager is not a great way of thinking about it. So they have to internally figure out, well, actually, how can we, for us, reimagine what a product manager does? Yeah. So maybe instead of saying a product manager, maybe the function is, we actually describe the role, the responsibilities, and kind of what you're describing is, I'm the person, or one of my roles is to bring demand and supply together, study demand and study the interaction between supply and demand. Or maybe it's thinking about one particular product, how it does or doesn't fit in with our other products that we offer. So maybe that's the way to kind of like blow up the idea of product manager by looking at how are people actually reinterpreting that role, and then maybe thinking about that's our basis of kind of reimagining those roles into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We 11FS talk a lot about in the financial services industry moving away from kind of commodity products, which is kind of more legacy
Yep.
kind of products in the financial space to truly digital services, and we're seeing a lot of that being designed through some of the fintechs that are coming to market. And for me, the shift there is from products to services. We still call a product manager a product manager,
yes, yep.
and we still call a minimum livable product. We worked with a client actually towards the end of last year who kind of rephrased that. And so we said, what's our minimum livable product going to be?
Yep.
They redefined it as a minimum livable experience. And great, it's because for me, jobs to be done thinking is about creating services.
Yes.
It's about creating experiences, not rigid boxes which we force customers into.
Yep. Right, well that's what we talk about, like what are people really buying? I'm not buying, the product itself is just the kind of, maybe not even physical, but that's just kind of we think of like products as functions or services, whatever you want to call it, right? The things that we buy are actually, we call them like functions, meaning it takes input and it spits out some output. So I'm really hiring something that will take my life as it is today, do some work on it, and then output really the experiences and the life I want to have in the future. And so I think that kind of phrasing about, what is a product or what is a service, like what does that really mean? I think that kind of helps us step away from recognizing, well, they don't want the product or service itself, they want the change that it can help me bring, or the experience it helps creates for me. Like that's what I'm trying to get to. That's where we need to see and think about the opportunity, and then our innovation is all around, okay, well, how can we redesign that function or that thing in the middle? Is it only services? Is it service and some products? Is it some mix of that? Is it removing some things entirely and automating things for them? They're buying like a transformation unit. And, I'm trying to think of some new words of maybe what we can call it. That's how I think about it.
I think that's a really interesting point, because when I first started at 11FS, we were thinking about what services do our clients want from 11FS, and part of that was to understand the customer better, to find what new value they could offer to their customers. And so for me, that was partly through research. There'd be a research program, and we'd then think about where the opportunity was through a jobs to be done lens. But I quickly realised that actually part of it, that's a big part of it, but the other part of it is this kind of cultural change within the team, and empowering the team to stop talking. It's okay not to use all the buzzwords and all the jargon, remittances and all sorts of kind of financial words that are just so prevalent in their teams, and just talking from like a customer's point of view. Travel money is not remittances, it's travel money.
Travel money,
that's how customers talk about it.
Right.
And so I think there's a big kind of cultural change. The work that we do can establish within an organisation that is super beneficial for that team functioning in the way that is optimal for them being successful.
So that's absolutely right. So so you're offering a consultancy service, right? So I think that, and our business does that as well too, market research and consulting. And we find, so for us, like what jobs do people hire us for? I try to find, I see it as two buckets. It's, well, help us find the opportunity, right? Help us create growth through finding the opportunity. But this other job, which they honestly might be more important in some ways, but they kind of like also say, but maybe they're embarrassed to say maybe, is like help us create organizational alignment. Help us all get on the same page and become better at working together. Because I think that's, I think that's what kind of jobs thinking really helps organizations, is the marketing people can use the same language of supply and demand that the product people can say, that customer support can say, that design teams can use, strategy can use. They all can use a lot of the same data, or they can, not exclusively, but they can share a common data set, they can share a common language about, well, what do customers want? What will they want? How can we generate demand? What gets them excited? What's holding them back? What do they consider as competition? And I find that's actually in some ways, it's difficult to say which one is more valuable, but very valuable to organizations is when they can have that common language, get organizational alignment about, answer, everyone in the organization can answer, what business are we really in? And who do we compete with? When people start using us, what will they stop using? So I think if everyone in the organization can answer those questions the same, then you have great organizational alignment. And I think jobs thinking helps create that and helps them all understand and answer those questions the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're working in agile teams.
Yes.
Because I think some of the challenges in big organizational structures is there's an innovation or a research team that are kind of finding an opportunity. They pass it on to a development team who create the thing.
Yes.
They pass it on to an engineering team that build the thing, and then the engineering team pass it on to the marketing team that have to sell the thing. And by the time it gets from A to D, the message is lost. And so with agile teams, with teams that are kind of cross-disciplinary, and you have that kind of power of language that Jobs to be Done brings, that you can communicate the why.
Yep.
We were working we're building a bank at the minute in the US, and it's great for the Jobs to be Done research to come through that first phase, and for engineers to come into the team to start building this thing and go, I understand why we're building this. I understand why you prioritize that over that, and I can understand why we're doing this first, because I can see the bigger picture here. I can understand it from a customer perspective, and that's massively powerful.
Right. It's funny. I've noticed that too. That it's like there's a consensus, or often, right, that like waterfall engineering is bad, like agile engineering good, or delivery, right? Yet there's still like waterfall happening, that type of process still happening in other parts of the organization. Market research does some work, and then they pitch it over the fence to product, who then maybe pitches over the fence to engineering, or so on and so forth. So there is seen value in cross-functional, like maybe on the product and engineering time. Okay, we're going to work iteratively, we're going to collaborate together, yet they're still doing like waterfall and customer success part, or marketing, or so on and so forth, getting together. So I like the idea of, we've all agreed that agile is good for delivery, but why not bring that to how we work with the other parts of the organization as well?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the understanding of the customer and some of the basic skills that come with empathizing with the customer's position, understanding elements of research and feedback and how to use that data and information are kind of almost becoming foundational skills in the world we live in today, because it's super fast moving. Some of the most disruptive players in any industry in the market are super focused on customer jobs, customer outcomes, helping that customer make some progress in their lives. And for a marketer, or a product person, or a designer, or even an engineer, they need to have those basic skills to have that alignment.
Yep, they do.
And I think part of that is, training and teaching and coaching those different disciplines to bake that skill set into their role. But also for leaders of those organizations to recognize that this is a hugely big thing now, and we can't operate it without it.
Yeah, I think also there's some initial work in educating different parts of the organization about this type of thinking. So there's that one little hump to get over. There is some investment in the beginning. Let's get customer success, let's get marketing, let's get research, let's get product and engineering. Let's all get them understanding what's this thinking, and what's some of the basic concepts, and what's the kind of data that we work with. But once you go over that first hump, the gains are just tremendous. And I think one of the biggest gains we get is that, say like from a market research role, I may not, I can deliver you insights or data that you maybe as a product manager or as an engineer, I don't need to know everything about product management. I don't need to know everything about engineering or design, but if I communicate you with the right data and the right insight, then you can construct what you need to be successful in your work. So I think that's the kind of value too, is that once we all have agree that we share these principles and the shared insight and understanding of how things work and what motivates customers, then individually as a product manager or engineer, I know what I need to do based upon what we're all sharing as a common insight.
And have you seen this implemented well in the work that you've done?
Yes, it's usually, I'd say that it's best done. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is currently. Is usually around. Some larger organizations do it, but it's rare because there's just so much inertia and there's just so much internal politics that constrain that. But I find that startups now, or smaller organizations, and when I say smaller, I mean 1,000 people or fewer, they change this thinking, internalize it more, and adapt more than the larger organizations, which seems obvious, but I think larger organizations, it's basically adapt or die, because new people are coming to the market and starting off their organization of basically using demand and jobs thinking. This is actually how we organize our company. We're no longer going to organize our company around individual products. We're actually organizing our company and thinking around opportunities. Right? So your team is aligned around helping our customers, say like banking, for example, making sure that they're budgeting properly so they have 2 vacations a year, or whatever it is, right? So we have organizations run that, and okay, you're the team that's responsible for making sure that people are saving responsibility and so on and so forth, like those kinds of jobs. And they're starting off that way, and of course with that thinking, they're breaking outside of their product box. They're thinking, oh, okay, so maybe if we're here to help people save up for their retirement, then maybe what they need is, they need this product, and they need this service, and they need this, and they need that. Or maybe we need to create some other things, right, to do that. Whereas larger organizations, they're already kind of got their territory set up, and we are the mobile banking team, and so every opportunity that gets presented to us gets solved through the lens of mobile banking. So I think the smaller upcoming entrants, the companies that are entering the market, they kind of have to apply and think this jobs thinking, because that's what gives them the competitive advantage. And I think that the established companies, if they don't do it, they're going to be behind, or they're going to lose.
Yeah. And where do you think that the desire for change is coming from? Like, where are the pockets in these larger organizations that are screaming out for this change?
It's usually, it usually comes from, usually what we see, some of the catalyzing events are things like the board of directors or the shareholders are unhappy with the growth that the company is doing. So they put pressure on the CEO, who puts pressure on the VP of marketing or the VP of design or the VP of product. So that's a catalyzing event a lot. Or someone who's a market leader, we've been great for a while, but all of a sudden new entrants are coming in and are stealing away our market share, and we have this anxiety of, oh my gosh, we never thought about opportunity or innovation in that way, and we're losing out. We were the market leader. Why didn't we stay the market leader? So I find that those kind of catalyzing events are things that prompt organizations to recognize that, we need to change. So that's usually kind of when they are more open to job thinking.
Yeah, but it starts hitting their bottom line, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, that's it. It's like we're either growth has slowed, or we're seeing things happening in the market that we're not prepared for, and we believe that if we don't adjust or change how we operate and how we think, then they are going to start impacting our growth.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing so much of that in the financial services industry at the minute. Especially in the UK, which over the past kind of 2 or 3 years has exploded with new propositions, new fintechs that have come to market that have found growth and profitability, some of them in the marketplace very quickly. And a lot of the big incumbent players, the traditional players in the market, are starting to kind of wake up to that and say, okay, how do we get that kind of growth? What are they tapping into that we're not?
Yes.
What value are they delivering that we're not? And I think it's fascinating to watch an industry kind of transform itself in a way.
Yep.
Like financial services as a whole is kind of late to the digital party.
Yep.
Music being one of the earlier ones, news being one of the earlier ones that were kind of disrupted by digital, and now financial services, health is starting to move as well.
That's true. Yep.
Some of the more regulated industries that have kind of been slower to that are starting to change. And you're right, the kind of where we start to see that catalyzing effect of change within the organisation is when growth stagnates, or even in financial services when regulation kicks in and changes the dynamics of the market.
That's great. That's actually one of my earlier businesses I had was in the mortgage real estate area, or the mortgage banking industry. And actually the business I had was based upon a catalyzing event, which was, it was actually after the financial crisis in the United States. There was the Dodd-Frank Act was passed in the United States, which put all these rules on banking and mortgages and so on and so forth. And I saw that happen, and I anticipated. I was like, okay, there's going to be an opportunity here. And so actually, I remember I created a product or a business that would kind of anticipate and kind of help bankers deal with that. But that's actually, I think and that's maybe the downfall of kind of relying or being so product-centric as well also, is that if new regulation comes in, great, this regulation happens and actually our existing services or products can't adapt or built upon assumptions about how regulations were done in the past. So I think if your strategy is kind of what we were saying before, aligned to what business are we really in, right, and not being tied to one way of solving those jobs, then when regulation happens or there's change happens, we can adapt easily because, okay, we can adapt the product, or we're okay with maybe no longer supporting this product because we really know what business we're in. We can quickly adapt or create something new.
Yeah. And who they're competing with is a really important question. We were just discussing it earlier. And in financial services, it's usually a spreadsheet. It's usually rudimentary as a notebook or something like that. And things just don't exist. A kind of traditional bank will help you make payments and receive payments and see the transactions in a statement. But does it help me get out of debt? Does it help me save for a house? Does it help me go on holiday every year? The kind of jobs that customers have, it kind of doesn't. And actually, spreadsheets can help with a bit of that. Some other services, and actually, partnerships with people in businesses in travel or real estate with banking is a super interesting approach to solving some jobs in the marketplace, because banks can't do it all.
Right.
And actually, no one organisation can do it all sometimes.
Yeah, I think absolutely right, and that's kind of what I think job seeking helps us get away from is functionality, focusing on functionality. I think you articulated it brilliantly. Banks were focused on very functional things: receive payment, make payment, collect bills, pay bills, but never getting to why is that important, or do I even really want to do that? I mean, do I really even want to deal with tracking payments or collecting and receiving? Not really. I want to get out of debt. Yeah. So bank, take care of that and just tell me what I need to do. You handle all of the hard work of that. Just tell me where to put my money or where I need to change my spending, so I can, or maybe if I have the constraint around I make bad choices, maybe I'm going to make something up. Suppose if I sign up for a mortgage loan, or I try to buy a car, your banking app says, Alan, you're thinking about buying that 20,000 pound car. Maybe if you do that, then that means you're going to be more in debt, and you're not going to have the 2 vacations a year. Maybe look at cars more in this range. So actually, can really being like financial services really as a partner to helping the change and kind of a life partner, as opposed to just functionally, oh, we'll finance your debt, whatever it is, we'll help you get off that.
Well, money is very functional, and it really is an enabler to many things.
Yes.
And what's interesting is in the West is heavily financialized as a society, as an economy. But in the East, it's not so much. Until recently, it was very cash-based. And so in places like China and Southeast Asia, you've got these super apps that have popped up. So WeChat, Alipay, Gojek, all sorts of different super apps, which actually focus on, real-life jobs to be done. I want to order a meal. I want to take away like a Deliveroo for the East, or I want to be able to hail a cab, or I want to book a flight, or all of those are in these kind of super apps. And the financial infrastructure has had to go in to enable those transactions to take place in a digital world. And so the kind of the fintech that's kind of developing over there is baked into more lifestyle-based
That's very fascinating.
apps. Whereas over here, because we're heavily financialized,
Yes.
we've got a whole load of other financial jobs
Yes.
we don't really want to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. That's very
But
interesting.
they're hard for people to get done, and they cause a lot of stress and anxiety for people. So actually, it's kind of created some opportunity just to handle those things, which is why we see Monzo and Revolut and Starling and all these kind of fintechs kind of pop up and helping out with kind of things like budgeting and managing your money properly and getting to the end of the month without going into debt and all of those things.
That's very fascinating how, and again, I think that's where you will need jobs thinking, was that, again, if you're just focused on just function, you'll think, okay, send and receive payments, or like very kind of transactional, doing things. Once you go to a different culture or try to expand other things, that may or may not be important to them, or it's you're trying to figure out, you've built a round peg, but money is a different culture there, and it's a square hole. So you're trying to figure, okay, well, how can we make our existing services and products fit into an Asian culture, or we were talking about how like finance or money is different, for example, in like Muslim culture versus maybe a Western culture, or like how they see money and how their opinions of it are different. And so I think that's understanding what's progress to them in those contexts will help you figure out, will our existing technologies work, or do we need to create something new to bring those people over and have them. And
because the work that we do is international, we see the kind of cultural differences a lot between markets. I think it's going to be interesting to see how successful some of the British fintechs are in taking their propositions over to the US. A lot of them have publicly stated that's going to happen, and but the culture, even between the US and the UK, is very different.
It's different.
The markets are set up differently. Can you lift a kind of fintech proposition that's been successful in the UK and drop it in the US without any modifications? How do those jobs change? What are you?
Actually, I just read about that recently, and I think they were comparing. Oh, actually, I was talking to a friend of mine he's an economist, and we're talking about one difference between like Indian culture and American culture, just one of it. And I think he was talking about how, like in India, for example, I believe, or certain, I mean, India's huge, right? But certain cultural things are like they take pride in their savings, like how big my savings account is, and that's actually, and I think it's often the woman of the household will do that, and she takes pride in like saving money. Whereas in the United States, actually, like, they don't really care about that. It's all about debt and spending and consumption. So, for example, if you were to take a message around spend more, we enable you to spend more and buy that car that maybe you couldn't buy right now, transport that messaging or that thinking over to the Indian culture, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, no, that's actually not really what I want. Or vice versa, if you take, a saving mentality to Americans, they might not want that. Maybe they want to hear, oh, help me get that car I really want to get, or like help me get that house that maybe I otherwise couldn't afford. So like adjusting your messaging in that way, and then figuring out what technologies and products we need to create to kind of serve how those jobs are different across different cultures will help you create growth and move to new markets.
And that could really kind of spark some interesting conversations around partnerships, because fintechs in the UK, do they partner with some other lifestyle-based digital service in the US? So you can afford that car if you just manage your money slightly differently. If you just do it this way instead of this way, then you could get in that car quicker, but it needs to lead to a different outcome other than just saving money, because that might not resonate with the US market. So the partnerships angle, I think, is really interesting. And we see so many partnerships in the fintech world anyway, that I think that's just going to expand as we can start to design new propositions around partnerships that link together, that kind of complete these end-to-end journeys and experiences for customers outside of industry vertical domains. And I think that's a super interesting development that I'm really kind of interested to watch over the next few years.
It is.
Well, that was fascinating. Thanks for dropping by. And
it was great talking with you, and I learned so much. Actually, you've been evolving job syncing and doing great things, so I'm really looking forward to collaborating on that. And you've been innovating with it within the financial applications, and really kind of pushing the thinking and really being very creative with it. So I'm very excited to kind of see what you all are doing in the future.
Great, and thank you for being very open with your thinking as well. And hopefully I can drop by in New York at some point, and we can do the same over in the States.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
Yep.
Cheers.